23 financial year. Officials at the ministry say studies are still underway on the viability of Moroto, Nakasongola, Soroti, Masaka, Kabale, and Wakiso being elevated to state status. However, the elevation will soon see government functions and ministries move to the newly created cities as part of the decentralization.
In future, as we grow and as our planners try to widen the scope of planning, we should anticipate such benefits of certain ministries going to their respective cities. And at worst, the decentralization of the functions of certain ministries. For example, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, in as far as issuance of passports is concerned.
Local government minister retired Colonel Tom Butime believes the move will decongest Kampala and create job opportunities for many Ugandans who have since been scrambling for social services in Kampala.
So people have been coming all over from the rural areas where we all come from, all of them conglomerating in Kampala, isn't it? For services and jobs, etc.
The minister adds that funding for these cities is going to be enhanced from what they were previously receiving from the central government.
The proposed 9 cities have been getting financing amounting to 111 billion after elevation to city status. They will require an additional 56 billion.
Government also says the new cities will not affect mother districts but add more value in service delivery. However, development analysts warn that Ugandans should be prepared for more taxes to raise more money to sustain these institutions. It further implies that the tax bracket for a small businessman in Mbarara will be increased to match that of a city status.
So we actually anticipate that creation of these cities will cause the existing small businesses to grow alongside with the cities, and therefore taxation will also, because taxation is supposed to be fair.
Jingo Francis, NTV.
Well, that's a story that we ran on NTV last night, and 6 others are still under study, and the process is expected to be concluded by the end of the financial year 2019-2020. But such a move does not come without costs, like we have had in the story. These new cities are to be operated in a phased manner starting in 2020 will require 59 billion Uganda shillings. They include Entebbe, Jinja, and Arua, among others. So this morning, we ask a gentleman who has been there and done it all when it comes to issues of local government to explain the implications of such a move. Former local government minister, Honorable Pereza Ahawe, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
New cities.
I'm glad to be here, by the way, for the first time.
For the first time? Yes. There's a first time for everything.
I even got lost. I first went to...
Where did
the
you?
hotel.
There was a hotel. Maybe you wanted to sleep. It's still early morning, man.
I just had never been here.
It's nice to have you for the first time. Mbarara City is one of the cities that I know has been crying out for a new city for a very long time. We want city status. We want city status. It is finally here for them, but it comes at a cost.
So what's the issue?
Is it something that we should be excited about? Is it something that we should be worried about? Well, they say traders will now be, their businesses will be booming and bigger. But the question is the taxpayer ready for that amount to have Mbarara? I'm just speaking on that city because I know it pretty well, for it to become a city.
Thank you so much. First of all, by the time an urban area is declared a city, what are the characteristics?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What does the law say about such an urban area to be elevated? That area must be having a certain minimum number of people, population residing there. Although in Uganda we don't talk so much about residents because the population during the day impacts more on the services in the urban centers than the population at night.
Correct.
So sometimes we just emphasize the population during the day. Now, Mbarara, probably I can give you some more background that in 2009, the president wrote to the Minister of Local Government. Incidentally, I was a Minister of State. I had a senior minister, Honorable Adolf Musige. He wrote a letter recommending that we upgrade Mbarara municipality to a city status, and he gave his justification. At that time, the population was the biggest, factor, which was about 300,000 people. Now we had divided roles, me and my senior minister. So at that time I was in charge of urban authorities, and he was largely in charge of local authorities, districts and sub-counties. So I got the letter. It was in my docket. I read it. Of course, I called my commissioner in charge of urban authorities. That time it was Mr. Charles Katarika, who is now retired. We sat and discussed. When you are in the ministry, as a minister, you should always be conscious of your role. You give political guidance, policy guidance. You must always be conscious, because you take an oath to advise the president at all times. And you know, here is a president who comes from Mbarara. Here is the same president who is recommending that Mbarara becomes a city. To me, I did just look at it technically. I also looked at it from the lens of politics. Then I said, Charles, how do we handle this? Can you do me a small search and look at these towns, regional towns, and see whether we can simultaneously elevate them? And I talked about Mbale. I had been in Mbale many times. I gave him Gulu. I had been to Gulu many times. I gave him Aroa. I had been to Aroa many times. And as a special interest, I gave him Jinja as well. The reason I gave Jinja, I had been to a country called Indonesia, and actually South Korea. And as I was traveling from the center to certain other places of interest, I noticed a certain, what do you call them? These things they used to advertise. A billboard. A billboard. City of industry. A very huge billboard. Crossing the road, city of industry. And I can assure you, you could never see any residence. It was all industries all through. For a stretch of over 10 kilometers, only industries. This is in Indonesia and South Korea. So my mind would always reflect the history of our Jinja town.
Correct.
Then I said, no, we must create Jinja as a special case, although it is also in the eastern region. But you see, it was an industrial center.
It no longer is.
And it can be revived. So what we recommended at that time was that we revet Mbarara, we revet Mbale, we revet Gulu, we revet Jinja, specifically as city of industry, and then Arua.
So what you're saying
now,
essentially
the reason was because we wanted to regionalize, so that people, you know, there are advantages of creation of these huge urban centers. So I said certain regions shouldn't lose out. So that's the history, the basis.
So what you're saying is that this was actually something that was birthed when you were still in that particular seat?
I'm not certain, because you see, the thinking of the president is not my thinking.
Correct.
I can't go into his mind and read him.
Then what
but
would
I
you say?
thought it had nothing really to do with me and my colleague. He could still have written the same letter, even if somebody else was in the office.
So when you look at this, Honorable, 2009 the idea came to mind. 10 years later, we're now looking at it perhaps in a year from now becoming a reality. But as a country, can we sustain this? Because now sustainability of this project.
You see, one thing that I must now emphasize, like he asked taxpayers and what, you see, we must always be conscious that we pay for our services. Yes, you go to any city in the world, go to New York, go to Washington, there is nothing for free. Not even going to the toilet. So this idea of not paying for our services, in my view, is a wrong conception. We should get to know that every good thing comes at a cost. We must always know that at a certain point in future, we must pay for our education.
But if, Honorable, you're going to say that, where is corruption going to be a part of this? Because it has been raised a number of times.
Well, corruption
funds are coming through, and then corruption
is a completely different thing. If I am here to talk technically about the subject, corruption is not technical. Corruption is political. Okay? I'm talking about a situation, an ideal situation, a best practice that I can lift from a country that probably is not corrupt and replicate it in our country. That's what I'm interested in. These other weaknesses notwithstanding, is there evidence that actually the welfare of the people can improve with the creation of these urban areas?
Honorable, let's look at it critically, and we're looking at the first phase.
Are you saying I was not critical?
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all, Honorable. I want us to now pretty much just break it down for the people. We already have the first phase, and the cities we're looking at, pretty much cities to be, we're looking at in the first phase is Arua, Gulu, Jinja, Fort Portal, and Barara. You did say that the first key aspect when it comes to characteristics that need to be looked into to see if these areas warrant to be elevated to city status. Now, over and above looking at the what did you say? Population of that particular area. What are these other requirements that, say that, okay, fine, we have looked into these factors and you have met the threshold. For example, for Arua, you are at 80%. At this point in time, we can warrant you to be actually elevated to city status. What are some of these requirements? Over and above the population.
That's why I said that the population factor is the most overriding factor. Why? Because the population question explains these other services we're talking about.
Correct.
If we're talking about the number of schools, if we're talking about the number of hospitals, if you're talking about the number of water points, if you're talking about electricity, these services are extended in relation to the population.
And
I don't know whether you have read one of the appendices of our constitution. Even when government is allocating funds, there is a formula, and the biggest component of that formula is population. So these others to me are subsidiary variables. The primary variable is population, and I can assure you, even the quality of the population is very important.
Correct.
It's when you are planning, you must be conscious of the level at which you are. You have, in the last 20 years, implemented universal primary education. Probably in the last 10 years, you extended to secondary education. Universal, meaning everybody must proceed in school. And now it is as if, although we are paying a little bit, universal university education. We have over 40 universities. Now let me tell you, there is none of these products of those schools who will want to live on the land. As soon as they finish, whether it is probably P7 is a bit low, senior 4, senior 6, university, they all want to go into where there are opportunities outside the land. You get what I mean? Now, should you not plan for that? Where that population is going to be absorbed, then you are going to be in trouble.
Honorable, you're talking about it in a technical perspective. But let's look at it technically now. We were talking about 59 billion Uganda shillings, taxpayers' money. And today in the Daily Monitor, when you go to page 7, I think it is page 7 of the Daily Monitor today, actually page 8 of the Daily Monitor, government is telling the teachers, we have other priorities. 59 billion Uganda shillings for these cities. We're looking at teachers who are asking for 49 billion Uganda shillings. In your statement you say, well, for these towns we have to look at services. We are looking at schools, we are looking at health services. The doctors and nurses in this country have not one, not twice, not 3 years demanded, asked, put their foot down that they get salary increments. The teachers have put their foot down. Monday is when the term kicks off. The teachers are still demanding that they get salary increment. Are we choosing our priorities wrong? Are we choosing our priorities based on the political view of things? Because if we're looking at services like schools and health services, and this is where the doctors that are complaining, this is where the teachers that are complaining are, and we're choosing to put money more in city status than getting the teachers who are asking for 10 billion less to be happy so that services are better in these cities, and then we can turn them into cities later.
I did get your name properly, by the way. What's your name?
David.
David. That's a very good question. But remember, I made a statement. I said for any good thing, there must be a cost. Yes? And by the way, government is not stupid. They know how to prioritize. Like I told you, somebody must pay some little sacrifice for something else to come up. Our teachers, our doctors, by the way, I'm a teacher. Although at a certain level.
Not the complaining level.
Well, you know, I've seen universities close. I was teaching in Makerere for many years. So, in my view, it is more of a crisis if we don't plan to absorb these children we are training. We have been training for the last, I don't know how many years. It's already almost an explosion. Don't think these boys who are running with Baby Wine and others, they are just lumpians. No. A number of them are graduates. We must plan and find a way to fix them. And they are fixed best in the service industry. But like we said, there are certain other weaknesses in our systems that certain individuals sometimes don't take certain things serious. But in other experiences, I have a paper here written by a colleague of mine. He gives, certain advantages, and he qualifies that for a city to reach that expected level, yes, either of growth or of development, these must be the standards. You must have like business centers in those cities. You must have the environment in general within that city must be conducive enough to absorb this population which has gone into those cities.
And do you think
the problem that we have sometimes is that I will give you a quick example. When this Namavi Industrial Park was planned, it's about 30 years ago. But when the land was being given away, not even a single investor got a piece of land. The land was divided among certain individuals. Until recently, when actually a new administration in the Uganda Investment Authority decided to dispossess some of those individuals. So you're talking about the corruption element, it becomes a problem, but I don't want to go there. That is where we could have a problem. But you can see now, when that thing was addressed with some new management and what, when you go to Namavi and you look all over there, how much do you think that complex, I mean how many of our boys and girls can find themselves in that complex? Now this is what we're talking about. Put an industrial park like that one, service it with all the amenities, attract our people, and part of the training must be geared towards being employable in some of those centers. Yes? All right. Put certain computing systems, complexes. I was reading something in the papers about, is it Uganda or somewhere, where there was a very big project. A certain facility was equipped with computers to train, I think, teachers and what. But the thing is getting dust and cobwebs. People don't want to go and train because there are no allowances for training. You can see the mindset.
Honorable, Honorable, I'd like you to answer this. So you have clearly stipulated the standards for a town to be elevated to city status. But in your view, the towns that have been proposed that are going to be elevated to city status, of course in the 4 phases, do you think they've met the threshold?
I wouldn't say. I was also meeting that threshold whenever you create an urban authority. I had my reasons why I disagreed with some of those attributes. Because I have a brain. Somebody could have made a mistake by putting those standards in the law. But if I see a situation and I visualize and say, wait a minute, why do you want me to wait until a population is 100,000 in order to create a municipality? Why do you want me to wait? When I can see there is something that is likely to. Now what I'm going to do, I will create it, expand its boundaries, create some space where I can put facilities, yes, and then attract that population to be there. I'm not going to be static with the law. I'm going to think, create the entity with 50,000 or 80,000, expand it, put amenities that are going to attract more people into that area and liberate the land. Now when the land becomes, the land is static, but it can be small. As the population grows, the land can be small. But as the people get out of the land and go into the city center, the land expands and it remains for those who can actually ably develop it, even more qualitatively.
So in other words, you're in support of this? Are you in support of this?
But I'm telling you, I'm part of the author.
Right, okay.
Let's now get into the details. For someone that is in Entebbe, someone who is in Jinja, someone who is in Arua, in Fort Portal, in Gulu, in Barara, they're thinking about, it is going to become a city, but of what impact is it going to have on me as an individual, me as a person that has grown up or is living in Barara, who has like a small business in Barara? What is the actual impact? This is, you see, when we talk of technicalities, sometimes we talk figures, we talk percentages, we talk impact, but the reality is people don't feel it or they don't get it. So what is the expected impact?
Well, I don't know what to expect from me in terms of response. But you see, for me, I'm not going to look at a particular person as an economist. You know, development it's like an umbrella. First of all, you have growth and then development. Now, development can benefit people, but it can also disadvantage others. Don't think everybody who's in Kampala here is very happy with its expansion and development and what and what and what. There are people who have gone back to the villages. And that's what economics does, especially neoliberal economics. The capital must support a certain section of society, must disadvantage others. It's you who must find a niche. How do you organize yourself and fit within that context?
Okay.
It's not that the government is going to say, Kenya, David, what's the name?
Mala.
But for you, are going to benefit this, you're going to benefit that. No, 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 no. You must find a way of fitting yourself into the entire framework.
Well, Honorable, one thing as you say that as an economist, it's going to have implications. They could be positive, they could be negative.
Yes.
And you mentioned the fact that for every good thing, it comes at a cost.
At a cost.
Right now, our parliament has 458 MPs. With this, what's going to happen is we're going to have 2 more MPs from each of these 9 cities.
That one I even want to say it very quickly, that I don't agree with the size of parliament, and I detest it.
So don't we see that in any way
it is not right.
More and more?
Well, that is a political cost. But my view is that we could have a sizable, you know, some of these cities will have, look at Kampala. They're vibrant. The council. And I think they are earning a little better than an average civil servant. Why would you rush to go into parliament? Why wouldn't we create, you know, environments where people are going to be councillors in those cities? And we reduce the size here. The problem here is that we have become selfish really politically. MPs no longer think about the population. I'm sorry to say this on air, but surely it's not right. Okay. It's not right. When we decentralize, I think we should also decentralize political space.
Okay.
We leave a thin and a lean parliament to handle national matters. We send these others to those municipal and city councils. We had even wanted to create regional governments where we could float all those, and they go down there and they start thinking for those regions rather than bickering here. The other day I was really ashamed. They showed parliament and there were less than 20 people out of 400. I said, what's going on?
Honorable Pereza Ahabwe, your debut has been something quite impressive, we have to say. So now you can tick that box on things to do. 2019, you have made your debut, and it's a very good one. Thank you very much. Former local government minister, Honorable Pereza Ahabwe, putting more into context the elevation of these towns into city status. 59 billion Uganda shillings is the cost at which the taxpayer has to say. But as Mr. Pereza has said, he says, well, it will come at a certain cost. And, well, unfortunately, the teachers, the doctors, it might be at your cost. But we know you have a lot to say. We can see it on social media. So get down as well. The hashtag is morning at NTV. Have your say. Throw in your contribution as well. We'll get into it as the show goes on. That has been our Kickstarter conversation. Mr. Pereza, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And thank you very much.
Thank you also for engaging me. It was nice. You have very tough questions. I am impressed by by this kind of show.
Okay, thank you very much, Vanessa. That's our Kickstarter conversation. Morning at NTV continues right after this.
Play and win every 10 minutes. For every 1,000 you spend, it gives you one entry into the jackpot this Sunday.
On MTN, simply dial *165*33#. That's *165*33#. Then enter your 3 lucky numbers.